Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. In this tutorial we'll be creating 3 miniature cakes with blue frosting and a few different piping tips. The very first cake that we're going to be creating is with the 104 tip, or the 127D tip actually. It's basically a 104 tip but on steroids. I've got my crumb-coated buttercream cake and I'm marking lines with a diagonal section of a triangle ruler. This is going to be a guide for me to pipe along just to make sure that the diagonal remains the same slope, rather than if you didn't have these lines and you're just doing it by eye, the slope on your diagonal slant might be a little bit too deep by the time you make your way back around the cake. So this will just ensure that it stays the same all the way through. Make sure that the fat side of the piping tip is touching the cake at all times. If it doesn't, your big ruffle might end up kind of falling off the cake. So by touching it to the cake, it ensures that it sticks on really well. Overlap slightly each time you pipe. And I made sure to pipe well and truly over the cake so that I could bring that lip of frosting to the middle and create a nice flush top edge. Pop it into the fridge to set and then work on your fondant flowers. This is Bakels fondant. I've colored pink with a little bit of gel food color. When you cut the flower, make sure to rub it against your countertop just to make sure that the edges are nice and sharp and they don't have any random fondant frilly bits on the edges. Apply one on top of the other, sticking them on with a little bit of water and then applying them onto your cake. I added a bit of water behind the flowers when I applied them to my cake just so the fondant became sticky enough to stick on. But you could also use buttercream instead. Add some to the very top of your cake for extra jazz. They do look a little bit flat on the top, so just press into the centers to raise those petals and make them look a little bit more dynamic. Behind these flowers, I'm adding in plunger cut leaves. It might actually be a good idea to apply these on your cake before your flowers, I found afterwards. It did become a little bit finicky trying to fit them underneath. Onto the buttercream, I've stuck on some edible silver druggies as well. For our second cake, we're going to be using a round piping tip. Try for a number 2 or number 3. This is a pre-crumb coated cake, 4 inches round as well. And I've taken a barbecue metal skewer to indent these swirls onto my cake. You could use a toothpick or a bamboo skewer instead, something nice and sharp. You'll notice every time I move that skewer on the cake about a few centimeters, I'm constantly taking the buttercream off the tip. This will just make sure that the indent is nice and neat and we don't get too much of that buttercream frilly section ruining our design. You could totally freehand this with the piping instead, but I think it's a really great way to kind of envision the design on your cake before you do the piping, and it's just a lot easier, I think, for beginners. Once you've completed this indent all around your cake, it is time to overlap it with buttercream. I've decided to go in with the same color buttercream, but I think it'll look really cool if you darkened it slightly with just a few extra drops of gel food color, and that way it just pops a little bit nicer. This is that number 2 piping tip that I'm using, starting at the top and then creating a shell border. What I'm basically doing here is squeezing out the buttercream till it touches the cake. I build that circle nice and big to make sure that it covers the whole line, and then I completely stop adding pressure on the bag as I drag it down, and that'll finish off one pearl. So it's basically a dance of movement and pressure on the piping bag. You could practice this on something flat beforehand, and once you're happy with the technique, you can transfer it to your cake. This design is very relaxing, but it will take its toll on your hand, just FYI. I've got some of those blossoms, adding a bit of water to stick one on top of the other, and then applying it to our cake the same way we did with the first one. This time I'm adding it towards the bottom of the cake, and I'm just focusing this pattern on the base. What also looks really good is when you add blossoms onto the base as well, just applying them here and there in between the flowers. This is also a plunger cutter, by the way. Before I plunge the blossoms onto my cake, I'm actually adding a little bit of water behind each blossom to ensure that it sticks. Add in your fondant leaves. And again, you could pop these on first and then the flowers over top to make your life just a little bit easier. I like to use the back of my paintbrush to help move them into position. My fingers are a little bit too big. For the very last cake, this is like a beginner's dream. It's just super, super easy, but it'll still look really elegant too. So I've taken a crumb-coated cake and I'm applying that blue frosting. I'm going to show you guys from start to finish just how quick and easy it can be to apply frosting onto your cake. So I'm starting at the base and I'm moving my spatula left and right to help smooth it on there and work that buttercream. The more you work it, the less air bubbles you'll have in your cake, or in your frosting, I should say. Once you've applied it all the way to the top, grab that frosting scraper and then go around. I'm adding a little bit of pressure to help move the buttercream around. And in one sweep, the whole thing is nice and smooth. Also helps to microwave your frosting, by the way. That also helps to smooth everything out very easily and quickly. Into the fridge she goes to set. And then apply your flowers in a row, traveling up the cake. You can alternate the colors in the rows. So for example, you could do one pink and one yellow and just kind of alternate like that. But I've kept them all pink. For the blossoms, I've gone in yellow for contrast, adding a bit of water behind them as I plunge them onto my cake. This time around, I decided to add buttercream leaves instead. So I've used a number 352 piping tip with some green buttercream frosting, and I'm just aiming it diagonally behind the larger flowers. On the other side, I'm angling it slightly differently, just so that they don't all look the same. And continue this around your cake. And that is how you create these three gorgeous miniature cakes with the blue buttercream frosting and the fondant flowers. I really love marrying the two together rather than having like an all buttercream or an all fondant style cake. Marrying the two still looks really, really good. Just got to make sure that the buttercream frosting is nice and smooth, whether you go over it with a hot spatula or a hot scraper, just to ensure it is as silky as it can be. Hope you guys enjoyed these designs and give them a go. If you do, please do tag us #Rosie'sDessertSpot so we can see your amazing creations as well. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you again in the next video. Take a plunger cutter. Seriously. Christian, can you get that? Christian! I can hear you. Thanks.
Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's. Oh my god, can you mime and I'll be your voice? Just pretend like you're talking and moving. Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. This week, I'll be showing you how to make a cake.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Love it. Do you mind throwing it at me?
I'll definitely throw it at you.
Thank you.
Ready?
Uh-huh.